December 6, 1917, 8:45 in the morning. Halifax Harbour, Nova Scotia, Canada. Two ships collide in the narrow channel known as the Narrows. A minor accident, by the look of it. Some scraped paint. A small fire breaks out on one of the vessels. Crowds gather along the waterfront to watch. Office workers lean out of windows. School children press their faces against classroom glass, fascinated by the burning ship drifting slowly toward the pier. Nobody in those windows knows what that ship is carrying. At 9:04 a.m., it detonates. Nearly 3,000 tons of high explosives, all at once, in the middle of a city of 50,000 people. It remains the largest man-made explosion in human history before the atomic bomb. Close to 2,000 people died. 9,000 more were injured, many of them blinded in that exact moment by flying glass because they were standing at windows watching the fire when it went off. The ship was called the Mont-Blanc, a French cargo vessel loaded with picric acid, TNT, gun cotton, and benzol, one of the most dangerous cargoes ever to enter a North American harbor. Our crew knew exactly what was on board. The moment the collision sparked a fire near that cargo, they did not try to fight it. They abandoned ship immediately, rowing for the far shore as fast as they could. What they could not do, in the panic and the language barrier of that morning, was get anyone on land to understand the danger in time. The burning ship drifted toward the busiest part of the city. And the city, with no idea what was approaching, simply stood at its windows and watched. Three things about Halifax that almost nobody outside Canada knows. The first, one man did understand the danger in time, and he used his final minutes to save strangers he would never meet. Vincent Coleman, a railway dispatcher working near the harbor, learned what the Mont-Blanc was carrying just before the explosion. Instead of running, he stayed at his telegraph key and sent an urgent message to an incoming passenger train, warning it to stop short of the city. The train received the warning and held back. Coleman did not survive the blast. The people on that train did. The second, the eye injuries from this disaster were so severe and so numerous that Halifax became, almost overnight, a significant center for the development of modern techniques in treating traumatic eye trauma. A grim medical legacy directly tied to thousands of children and adults who had been watching the fire from behind glass when it shattered. The third, relief aid arrived from an unexpected place almost immediately. The city of Boston, Massachusetts, hundreds of miles away, sent doctors, nurses, and supplies within a day of hearing the news. That act of rapid, generous relief became the origin of a tradition that continues to this day. Every December, Nova Scotia sends Boston a Christmas tree as thanks for help given more than a century ago. In December 1917, the First World War had been grinding on for more than 3 years, and Halifax had become one of the most important convoy assembly ports on the Atlantic coast. A constant flow of merchant ships, troop transports, and munitions vessels moving through its harbor on their way to support the war effort in Europe. By December 1917, Halifax had become one of the most strategically vital ports on the Atlantic seaboard, the primary staging point for convoys of merchant and military vessels gathering before the dangerous transatlantic crossing to supply Allied forces fighting in Europe. The harbors protected. Deepwater basin made it ideal for this purpose, but it also meant a constant stream of munitions, ships, fuel tankers, and troop transports moving through a relatively narrow channel on any given day, all under wartime pressure to keep schedules moving despite the inherent risks of crowding that much dangerous cargo into one waterway. The SS Mont-Blanc, a French cargo steamer, arrived in Halifax that week, loaded almost entirely with high explosives, bound for the front, roughly 2,300 tons of wet picric acid, 200 tons of dry picric acid, 10 tons of gun cotton, and 35 tons of benzol fuel stored in drums on deck. It was, by any measure, one of the most dangerous individual cargoes afloat anywhere in the world that month. On the morning of December 6th, the Mont-Blanc was moving through the Narrows, the tight channel connecting Halifax's outer harbor to its inner basin. At the same time, the Norwegian vessel SS Mont-Blanc was heading the opposite direction, having been delayed leaving port the previous day and now running behind schedule for a relief mission to Belgium. A series of signaling miscommunications between the two ships, compounded by the narrow channel and converging traffic, led to a low-speed collision around 8:45 a.m. The impact itself was not severe enough to sink either vessel, but it tore open barrels of benzol on the Mont-Blanc's deck, and sparks from the metal-on-metal collision ignited the fuel almost immediately. The specific sequence of signals exchanged between the Mont-Blanc and the Mont in the moments before their collision became a subject of extensive dispute in the inquiry that followed. Each ship's pilot believed the other vessel had the obligation to give way under standard maritime right-of-way rules, and conflicting whistle signals exchanged in the final minutes only added to the confusion rather than resolving it. The Mont, already running behind schedule and reportedly moving faster than harbor regulations technically permitted for the narrow channel, made a last-second turn that, rather than avoiding the Mont-Blanc, brought the two vessels into direct contact. The impact itself, around 8:45 a.m., was relatively minor in purely structural terms. Neither ship was in danger of sinking from the collision alone. The catastrophe came entirely from what that minor impact ignited. The Mont-Blanc's crew, fully aware of exactly what their cargo could do if the fire reached the explosives below deck, made the only decision that made sense from their perspective. Abandon ship immediately and get as far away as possible. They rowed for the Dartmouth shore on the opposite side of the harbor, shouting warnings as they went. Warnings that, in the chaos, in a foreign language for many bystanders, in a moment nobody on land had any context to understand, simply did not register as the life or death information they actually were. With nobody steering her, the burning Mont-Blanc drifted slowly across the harbor toward Pier 6 on the Halifax side, directly toward one of the most densely populated working-class neighborhoods in the city, Richmond, full of homes, factories, schools, and dock workers' families. For nearly 20 minutes, the burning ship drew an enormous, fascinated crowd. People had no reason to think a small dockside fire on a single ship was anything more than an interesting spectacle. Office workers leaned out of windows along the waterfront for a better view. Teachers in nearby schools let children crowd around classroom windows to watch the smoke and flames. At 9:04 a.m. and 35 seconds, the Mont-Blanc's cargo detonated in a single, near-instantaneous explosion that flattened nearly 2 square kilometers of the city, generated a shockwave felt over 100 miles away, and sent a wave of shattered glass through every window facing the harbor, including every single window that crowds of curious onlookers had been standing behind moments earlier. The physical destruction in Richmond and the surrounding neighborhoods was near total. Wood frame houses were flattened or set ablaze by the blast and the fires it triggered in overturned stoves and furnaces. A tsunami-like wave generated by the force of the detonation displacing harbor water surged onto the shore and drowned some survivors who had been thrown clear of collapsing buildings, but not far enough from the rising water. The official inquiry that followed the explosion initially placed primary blame on the captain and harbor pilot of the Mont-Blanc, a judgment that drew criticism for years afterward, given the obvious mitigating context. A French crew unfamiliar with the specific harbor traffic patterns, operating under wartime pressure, attempting in good faith to navigate a crowded channel. Later legal proceedings in Canada's Exchequer Court reversed much of the original finding, ultimately assigning shared responsibility to both vessels, rather than placing the blame disproportionately on the French crew. By the time these later rulings were issued, years after the disaster itself, the practical consequences for anyone involved had become largely symbolic. No criminal convictions followed from either nation's investigation. The death toll, compiled in the days and weeks that followed, reached approximately 1,950 people, with estimates in some sources running slightly higher when later deaths from injuries are included. Roughly 9,000 more were injured. A specific devastating pattern emerged almost immediately among the wounded. An extraordinarily high number of eye injuries caused by flying glass from windows that thousands of people had been standing directly in front of, watching the fire at the exact moment of detonation. Some estimates suggest as many as 600 people lost some or all of their vision that single morning. One of the highest concentrations of traumatic eye injury ever recorded from a single event up to that point in medical history. The scale and specific nature of these eye injuries drew significant medical attention in the disaster's aftermath, contributing meaningfully to the development of new surgical and treatment techniques for traumatic eye trauma. Knowledge that would later prove relevant in treating soldiers wounded by shrapnel and glass on the battlefields of the war still raging in Europe. Vincent Coleman, a railway dispatcher, working in a small office near the harbor, had learned about the Mont-Blanc's cargo and the approaching danger in the chaotic minutes before the explosion. Rather than fleeing immediately, he remained at his post long enough to send an urgent telegraph warning to an incoming passenger train just outside the city, alerting it to stop before reaching the danger zone. The train received the warning in time and held back outside the blast radius. Coleman did not survive the explosion himself. His decision in the final minutes of his life is credited with saving the lives of everyone aboard that train. The relief effort that followed the explosion faced an additional, almost unimaginable complication. A major blizzard struck Halifax the very next day, dumping heavy snow across the city already filled with collapsed buildings, exposed survivors, and thousands of people suddenly without shelter in early Canadian winter conditions. Rescue and relief workers had to continue searching wreckage and treating the injured through genuinely dangerous winter weather, compounding an already overwhelming medical crisis. Hospitals in the city, several of them damaged by the blast itself, were overwhelmed within hours, treating patients in hallways, and any available space as supplies and staff ran critically short. News of the disaster reached Boston, Massachusetts within hours, and the city's response was immediate and substantial. A train loaded with doctors, nurses, and medical supplies departed for Halifax that same night, arriving to help treat the thousands of wounded and assist a city whose own hospitals and medical staff had been overwhelmed and, in some cases, directly affected by the blast themselves. That rapid, generous relief effort left a lasting impression on Nova Scotia. Since 1971, the province has sent an enormous Christmas tree to the city of Boston every December as a continuing gesture of thanks for help given more than a century earlier. Halifax rebuilt the devastated Richmond district over the following years, though the scars of the disaster remain visible in the city's collective memory for generations. Part of that rebuilding effort became a deliberate lesson in disaster-resistant urban design. The Hydrostone district, constructed in the heart of the destroyed area, used precast concrete blocks specifically chosen for their fire resistance, a direct physical response to how much of the original destruction had been compounded by fires breaking out in the wreckage of wooden homes. The neighborhood remains standing today, one of the only planned garden suburb developments of its era in Canada, built entirely as a response to a single morning's catastrophe. A memorial bell tower was eventually constructed, overlooking the harbor, its bells dedicated to the memory of those killed. Each December 6th, the city holds a formal commemoration ceremony, and the annual gift of a Christmas tree to Boston, continuing uninterrupted since 1971, remains one of the most enduring acts of international gratitude tied to any disaster in North American history. If you want to understand the disasters, where one decision, one warning, or one moment of courage changed who lived and who didn't, and the human cost the official numbers never fully capture, subscribe. Every week, a story that was hidden in plain sight.